Hey everybody, it's Jane Johnston with the Bar Hill Group, and
hey everybody, it's Andrew Plank with the Royal LePage. How are you?
with the Vibes Real
With the
Estate.
vibe, we got the vibe happening again. Yeah. You
Okay,
got a light going out of your head, Jane.
We're here with the Victoria Real Estate Show. It is May 25th, and I'm at a home inspection, so welcome.
Yeah, how's the inspection going?
Good. I'm here with Joy from Home Check. Joy, come and say hi.
Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you.
So today we're going to talk about the rules that have changed both on a federal, provincial level, and just see what the difference is. But first, let's get into today's stats.
Yeah.
All righty. I'm a little stressed.
Yeah, you got a lot going on there, Jane. As do we all, but yeah, it's good to be able to juggle these things. So what have we got? We've got the stats from the Victoria Real Estate Board as of Monday the 22nd. So just a few days ago. And you want to take it away, Jane?
Sure. So net unconditional sales to month so far are 540. This is pretty close to what last year was at 760. So we have a week left in the month. New listings are at 928, and that's compared to 1,531 in May of last year. And active listings are up a bit, 2,120. We've seen these to be very consistent over the last few months. Yep. And that's compared to 1,776 for last year.
Interesting, talking about stats, and we were at that awards event a couple of weeks ago, and somebody said to me, you know, I said something about, well, we've got 1,400 realtors in Greater Victoria, and they said, no, there's more like 1,700, and I was like, no. Yeah, we're like 1,670 or something, some crazy number for the number of realtors in Victoria. So you've almost got, you know, a little more than one listing per realtor in the marketplace.
And sales. So there's a lot of competition. Somebody asked me what real estate's like. I'm like, well, it's very competitive until we get the listing or the buyer. And then it's very cooperative and collegial after. Everyone's trying to make it work.
Yeah, it's a funny business because we are colleagues and competitors at the same time. And so a lot of people don't realize that when you're hiring a real estate agent, you definitely want to find a real estate agent that can stand up for you, but also can keep the relationships with their colleagues, because you don't want somebody that's always. Yeah, you don't. There's certain types of negotiation that will just cause everyone's back to get up, and you'll never want to deal with that person again. And there's a few people in this industry, very few, where I've had that experience, and it can be very, very hard to go to the table with them again in future, and you know, it harms their clients.
True. And you know, when we get into multiple offers, we'll talk about not only the buyer. So interesting situation. I had multiple offers on a unit on the weekend, and it was a situation where we had to make sure that the buyers qualify. So I asked the agents, and normally I just say, you know, is your buyer ready to go? Yeah. Well, in this case, I asked more details, and it turns out that one of the buyers actually wasn't ready to go. Mm-hmm. So that's why their conditions were so long. So we ended up going with somebody who has already spoken to a lender.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes, you know, and that's the thing. Sometimes the best offer on paper is not the best offer unless the people buying can get to the finish line, remove their conditions, put down their deposit, be there at completion with the money on the table. It's just a piece of paper until then. So knowing something about these buyers and understanding that, and this was one of the conversations actually last week too at the panel discussion that the board put on, was, you know, looking at the stats that realtors have, and knowing realtors that are kind of full-time, really engaged and who vet their clients versus a realtor you may not know the history of, and they've just brought some buyer and they brought an offer and there's no information about the buyer even on the contract. Like, how many times have you seen a contract where the buyer's address is not included?
I do that sometimes.
You do?
I do it for privacy. Mm-hmm. I don't want, sometimes they Google it or they look it up on realtor.ca, or they look it up on the search, or the realtor does, and it reveals a lot of information. Then I'll put it in at the end.
The name itself can do that, but yeah, the address itself, the address can also, I mean, knowing if someone is in Victoria or if they're coming from Vancouver or Toronto or some other center, it's all information. It all goes into the pot of the decision matrix for the seller to look at.
I had a lawyer call me once and complain because she's like, how come you're not putting their phone number on the contract? I need the phone number. And I said, well, sometimes the buyer would call the seller.
Yeah, it's happened. Absolutely.
That's
and
why
this is not a contractual element, right? So it's information. It helps title office in filling in information. I guess it helps conveyancing. It helps it helps connect the, like, let's say it's Mike Smith making the offer. Having an address definitely helps to specify the Mike Smith, you might say.
Yes.
Right? So, okay. So moving on from there. So what we've said here is we're looking like numbers are, other than maybe new listings won't reach that point by end of month. New listings currently at 928 as of last Monday, and for end of month in 2022 was 1,531. We're definitely not going to see that level of listings, but everything else looks like it's kind of moving relatively similar.
And this is a great explanation about why the market is still fairly hot. It's because we don't have a ton of inventory. The listings aren't as high as they were. The market really slowed in May of last year, and we're seeing it more consistent this year. Feels like it's
finding, though, I'm seeing a lot of coming soons from colleagues on the network Facebook pages. I'm seeing a lot of new listings. I think we're kind of ripe for seeing a ramp up of listings I think it's going to be a late spring in terms of the activity in the listings.
Yeah, get your place on now, folks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so as of yesterday, May 24th, there was 297 new listings. This is a week's worth of data, right? So 297 new listings came online, 180 listings out of that pool from the last slide of 1,700 or so went pending, meaning that the buyer and sellers agreed to an unconditional contract. There were 103 price decreases. So this is interesting. We've been seeing this and commenting on this for some time now, but there's a very consistent high level of price decreases that we've been seeing for the last number of months, which just tells us that people are maybe listing a little higher, or that the properties aren't selling and they are having to make some adaptation on price. That doesn't mean that a property that just listed is always overpriced. There's a lot of properties selling right away, and we are seeing lots of multiple offers. So increases, we won't go into that. Small number of price increases, small number of properties back on market. 28 properties expired. So again, not everything sells, but that's a small number compared to what's coming on market.
So we are doing expiry and a relist, and sometimes with new agents, I get a question, why are we doing this? And essentially, especially if we're going into a new price range and somebody has expired the listing on the contract, this is a way of not on the contract, on the search. Oh my God.
So it's an interesting nuance.
It's a way to get it back onto their search.
Yeah, so it's an interesting nuance that when we talk about expired properties, they could be expired because somebody signed a 3-month, 6-month, 12-month contract with their agent and it didn't sell in that period and it just expired. But you can also do a contractual change and expire it early. And that is something that, as Jane is alluding to, can happen. You expire it early because you don't want to just cancel it, and then you just relist it right away and at a new price point to try to bring in new activity, and especially hit, as you said, those searches that maybe it wasn't being seen before because the price was a little higher. Yeah.
And it's interesting here to look at the ratio. So we have 300 to 180. So we're looking at about a 55% list to sale. So we're definitely in a seller's market now.
Yeah, and then new listings 297 versus expired 28. That's 10% of properties that are listing are not selling, or are relisting, not selling within the listing contract period.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, moving on. So what's this Bill 44 thing, Jane? What are we talking about today?
So we're talking Bill 44, but we're also talking some federal rules that have changed.
Yeah.
In provincially in BC, they've had some impact. So the first one is just about the Form B. The Form B is issued by your strata, and the purpose of it is to provide information about what the monthly strata fees are, the amount the owner owns the strata if they're behind. This is important for the lawyer to figure out so that there's no money outstanding when the property is conveyed. And then I really like to look at the Form B when I'm looking at a property, because it allows me to see if the seller has done any alterations to the unit, whether or not there's special levies due or upcoming expenses. And it also tells you what the balance is in the contingency fund. And what they're adding here is information on their insurance coverage, which is important because we want to know what the deductibles are. And that's important to let us know what the history of the.
So good or bad change here? What do you think?
I think it's great.
I do too. So this is a Bill 44. It's BC government made this rule. This is a local BC rule here. What we've done in the past is when we are listing or buying, helping an agent, a client buy a strata property, we go searching for these insurance documents, and they're not always included right away, or they can be hard and difficult to obtain. Not every agent obtains them. So now that it's actually in law that it has to be included with the Form B, it has to be provided when you ask for a Form B. This is so helpful, because we want to know what are the deductibles, what are the non-coverages, is there even insurance on the strata? There always should be, but we want to get these details.
And the other thing we're also doing is we're looking at what the resolutions are that have been approved, but not yet filed with the Land Title Office. And this is important because we want to see what the psychological mentality of the strata is. And so, especially right now, with some stratas going to 55 plus, this will tell us if the bylaws changed.
I love that you called it the psychological mentality of the strata. Stratas are corporations. We're talking about the mentality of a corporation, which is technically a corporation is technically considered an entity. So
I'm anthropomorphizing.
We're giving them personalities. Good job. Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Strata meaning the people.
Yes.
We the people. Okay. Contingency reserve fund. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, this isn't one that really I've paid a lot of attention to. It looks like they're increasing what is required for contributions to contingency reserve fund. We've often seen and helped buyers into properties we have that have various amounts in their contingency reserve fund. And not everyone is putting enough aside for those rainy days when this emergency happens, or this maybe non-emergency, something that they should have been aware of, knew was coming down the pipes, but didn't really prepare for, like a new roof or something. So it's good that this is now legislated that you're supposed to be putting more money aside. It will increase your strata fees, but it will also mean that there's less risk of those big surprises down the road.
Yeah, and so this is important when you're looking, if you're comparing two different buildings, that one you check to see what the reserve fund is currently, and then what the plans are in the future. And this means people, especially elderly people, I find at 55 plus, they don't necessarily want to put a lot of money away because they know they're not going to be there a long time. And so in that case, we want to see whether or not they're planning for the future or not. And so yesterday I was looking with some clients, and the contingency reserve fund was just getting $250 a month, and the other one was getting 400. And I'm like, well, if you're looking at the planning here, we're seeing one is saving for something and the other one is deciding they're going to deal with it with special assessment. So it's a very different mentality.
Yeah. And there's not necessarily a wrong here. And, you know, as we've had Russell Cass from Home Check-In many times, and he does a contingency reserve report, a depreciation report, you might say. and we'll look at the contingency reserve fund. One of the consistent pieces of advice that he gives, that we also give our clients, is put money aside in your own pockets for these upcoming special assessments or upcoming work. High strata fees aren't necessarily a bad thing. Low strata fees aren't necessarily a bad thing. Just understanding how it's allocated. And you might be wanting to put, rather than paying high strata fees and it all going into contingency reserve, contingency reserve, put it into your own bank account. And that way, when you go to sell your home, you can't pull the money back out of contingency that you have contributed, but you can certainly take it with you if there's been no special assessments in the meantime.
Yes,
anyway.
you want to see what suits your lifestyle. The other thing is the change is that the new one is that the developers must contribute towards a contingency reserve fund.
That's right.
This is interesting because I went into a condo the other day and the strata fees were just $250. I'm like, well, it's not going to stay that way.
No.
Yes.
Yeah, buildings often that are under 10 years old, you find they still have low strata fees. They are still feeling like they're under warranty. I think a lot of people don't understand too that the warranty, this 2-5-10 warranty, is really not a full comprehensive warranty for 10 years. The 10-year point is really just on structure. And most warranty issues and most contingency reserve items issues are not going to be around structure. 5 years is around building envelope, which certainly that is an important key piece and could get involved in items that could be a contingency item. But it's really 2 years on material labor. So
yeah.
Really should be putting money aside a lot earlier than people are doing. Anyway, we're getting into the weeds. Let's move on. Unless you have something you want to finish with this with.
No, I just think it's important. It'll be interesting to see if developers are fudging the budget to make it smaller at the beginning, so they don't have to contribute as much. So this is an unintended consequence, and I just got a finger on the nose from the inspector here. And the lights.
Lights work. Good to know. Okay.
Well, the first, I want to do this one.
This is a big one.
Period, because the first thing that realtors learned was how to spell recession.
Contingency, rescission. How do you say this? How do you spell it?
I heard recession period so many times.
Yes.
Anyway, it's a cooling off period. So the buyer, without any reason, can, within 3 days of writing a contract and getting it accepted, 3 business days, rescind their contract, and then they can just walk away. But they have to pay a penalty of 0.25%. That's 0.0025 of every $1,000. So what that means is that they can't write willy-nilly. This is what this is supposed to stop.
It's supposed to. They brought in this rescission period, and then they added this fee. We have the similar rescission period for new construction, which we've had for forever. And it's a 7-day rescission period, meaning if you go into the sales center for a new condo building or something, and you agree to buy a place, and you sign on the dotted line and agree to buy it, you have 7 days from the date to some business days to walk away, and there's no fee associated with that. But with this new one, because there's so much, yes, Jane.
Well, here are the unintended consequences. Buyers or realtors are writing offers with buyers with non-refundable deposits of big amounts.
Yeah.
They're also, and so somebody told me, well, that basically waives this. The sellers are getting a bit afraid because they know that within 3 days, there may be a change of heart on the part of buyers, which is not really happening in this market because it's a bit fast. I think when it slows, we may find this.
But then we would probably find, if it's slower, that people are bringing in regular conditions and not needing the rescission period. So
I think the other unintended consequence, and a good one, is that there are more conditions on offers. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do find most people are tying their subject removal dates to the rescission period now. So there may not be time to write. This is in a fast market. There may not be time to get all the.
There's a lot of nuances to this rescission period, and it's really important, that we advise our clients well. One of the other consequences of this, I might say, is, I don't know if you've noticed, but this year, with all the changes to all these rules, there are so many more tick boxes and check boxes and initial spaces on our standard contracts. And many of them aren't, like, there are some that are required, some are different areas you need to, it can be hard actually. Like, you have to double and triple and quadruple check your contracts to make sure you've got everything initial and signed in the right spots. This is no longer, as we hear stories about our colleagues back in the 50s buying a house on the back of an envelope or on a napkin in a coffee shop. This is a really complicated contract, and it's gotten more and more complicated, and it's really important to be aware of what you're signing, but also to be aware that there's a lot of moving parts that we have as advisors have to advise on, and that's our job, but it's really become very complicated.
Yes, and I wanted to say, if one of the other unintended consequences is if the agent has not gotten the money from the buyer for the rescission amount, that the seller then has to pursue the buyer legally.
Yeah, that's the way it's designed. So there's no requirement on we, the realtors, to collect this rescission money or have it collected in advance or whatever. It's between the seller and the buyer. If the buyer decides not to go forward and utilizes the rescission period, then it's up to the seller to pursue. We as realtors can do some negotiations depending on the situation of the negotiations to try to get that deposit either non-refundable or in advance or something like that. If it's held, then it's easier to deal with. But oftentimes the way we write contracts these days, the deposit's not being received until some period after this rescission period is already up. But,
and some people are doing 2 deposits, like it's changed the way people are thinking.
I was listening to a podcast. It was a psychology podcast. And they were talking about something in New Zealand that I thought was kind of related to this. I think it was kind of funny that law of unintended consequences kind of thing. In New Zealand, they were concerned about people taking their children out of school on non-holiday periods to take them on vacations. So they instituted a penalty on people for this. And with this penalty, whether it was $50 or whatever it was something to try to dissuade people from taking their children out of school on these non-holidays. They wanted people to be in school. But what had happened beforehand was people were feeling guilty about taking their children out of school. They were sort of against the rules. It wasn't really working too well. But now that it became just a fee for service, more people started utilizing it and saying, well, for $50, I've got authority now to take my children out of school. And I think that's the same thing with this rescission period. It's a similar effect. People are making offers and they're able to now. So the question, one of the unintended consequences that we haven't talked about and that we are starting to see is people making more than one offer at a time on a property.
I was asked that.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, we're not doing that, because you still have to do your due diligence. This doesn't excuse bad behavior.
It doesn't. Well, you say that, but then the question becomes, is it similar to the effect that happened in New Zealand where people are saying, well, if it's just a matter of a fee and there's 3 properties that I'm looking at buying and I know I can rescind, I'm willing to pay that price. I'm going to make those 3 offers. I would say, depending on the realtor and the interpretation, and get a lawyer's opinion, please. You're shaking your head, but I'm telling you that I think that's the psychology of it. That's the way people are looking at it.
Yes, I'm shaking my head because if somebody writes a contract, they're writing it with the intent of going through.
They're supposed to.
That's the purpose of a contract, and it's supposed to be, I get it, having the willy-nilly clause here, but I don't think that it's ethical. Anyway,
let's move on. 25 minutes. We've got a lot to talk about.
You know what? You know what? Here's why. You want to follow the platinum rule and treat people the way you want to be treated. And so don't write more than one contract at a time. It's a no-no.
Yep.
Anyway.
I would definitely encourage my clients against it and advise them to get legal advice. You hear what I'm saying, I hope. Okay.
I hear
Age restrictions. Age restrictions removed except for 55 plus. This is huge. We should have started with this in rentals. This and the rescission period are the biggest changes.
Yes, I'm leaving the best for last.
Okay, good job, Jane.
Anyway, so what happened as a result of this? The unintended consequence was that some stratas moved to 55 plus.
Yeah. So by removing this, there was a lot of stratas out there that were 19 plus, 35 plus, age restricted. They did not want to have children in the strata complex. And with this blanket removal of all age restrictions, except for the 55 plus, it caused a lot of consternation for those stratas that really did not want to have children in there. And so a lot of them did move to the 55 plus. Not a lot, but a significant number did change their rules. So we've lost actually more. I can't speak to the numbers, actually. I shouldn't say we've lost more than we've gained, but we certainly, one of the unintended consequences is we've lost some properties that were available for people that say over 20, and they're no longer available.
We used to get clients because we before, I guess we weren't able to really search age restricted for a long time, and then that field came in. And I used to get clients going like, what is going on? How come all the great condos are 55 plus?
They're cheaper. Yeah, because they're harder to sell. And anyway, there's been some nuances to this too. There were some changes to the rules. And I think they added some rules around the 55 plus that now allow you to have younger person in there as well as an owner and so forth. And I think even a family member, like a child. But I need to double check and circle back on that. But I know there's been some changes recently to that one.
So I think I do have that in here somewhere. Oh, no, I didn't. I took it out. But yeah, essentially, if you've been in the unit before the rule was passed, you're grandfathered in.
Or grandmothered.
Or grandmothered, as my husband would say. And what else? So they're starting now to pass bylaws for what kind of rentals they're restricting. That's interesting to me because
are we talking rentals now? Because you're on restrictions.
Well, so the age 55, yeah, I'm agreeing. They're now starting to pass bylaws that maybe like no more than 6 months rentals or no less than 3 months. These sorts of things are coming in. So I've had some clients call me. Have you had any clients call you?
I've had people call me that were considering, they wanted, this was early on in this whole thing. They called me about a building that they lived in that they knew was considering going to 55 plus. They had a 20-year-old adult child that lived with them. And they were curious about buying in another building and selling theirs because they did not want to be, they were concerned about the value loss by going to 55 plus.
Right.
And I said to them, if the strata is already talking about this, it's in the minutes. You essentially, even if it hasn't been done until it's resolved, you're going to have a hard time selling that unit for full value.
Yeah.
Anyway, but let's move on. Again, it's 10 o'clock now, and we're
okay.
Lots to talk about. Rentals.
So the other thing is the strata can get involved in evicting somebody if they do not like the tenant. I guess they can complain and then they can take it to court, but they can't screen the tenants coming in. So
right, it's given a little more control to the strata in terms of controlling rentals from that degree, I guess. So so the rental restriction no longer allowed to have a ban on long-term rentals. You can still ban short-term rentals. There's a lot of levels of legislation or control here because you've got your municipality rules around zoning and use, which may not allow for, short-term rentals. You can have a building that doesn't allow short-term rentals where the zoning does allow short-term rentals. But in terms of any bans around long-term rentals, that's all wiped away, and any bylaws that are still on the books, and there's a lot of bylaws still on the books. Stratas are not jumping to change their bylaws and go pay a bunch of money. They're essentially unenforceable.
And also one big difference is that now Stratus can impose a fine of up to $1,000 a day. And I believe it was actually $200. I didn't put day, but I think it was a week before. So they can really stick it to you if you do allow a short-term rental.
Yeah, that just makes sense, because some places could maybe rent for $500 a day, and maybe they're okay with a $200 a day fine just to just making some income.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
So the government of Canada brought in this anti-flipping tax, and essentially, in the past, I know a lot of colleagues did this. I know there's a lot of sort of small developers and just people who, as a part of their lifestyle, buy a home, live in it, fix it up, sell it, buy a home, live in it, fix it up, sell it. It's how actually many people get their start in building up the property ladder too, is finding a real sort of dump of a house and putting some sweat equity into it, and then moving it on. But the government of Canada doesn't like that, and they've brought in this anti-flipping tax. They don't want to see people buying a home and then reselling it within 365 days. So so the difference being that when you're buying your own single family residence and you own it and then you resell it, you're insulated from capital gains. And if you and even if it goes above the capital gains exemption amount, then it's 50%, I guess is what it is. But with this anti-flipping tax, all of the income, all of the profit that you make from this flip is considered business income, and it's fully taxable. So if you buy and sell within a 12-month period, except for certain circumstances like a death or a divorce, I think it's divorce, there's a number of personal circumstances that would allow you to sell within a 1-year period. But outside of those exemptions, you're paying income tax as if you were doing a business when you're selling within a year.
The cost plus, and then whatever profit is the delta, 50%.
I'll put in the notes, the link to the Canadian website with the Q&A on this. I found it pretty interesting.
So to me, the unintended consequence here is that a lot of people were renewing properties. I'm using a lot of quotes, air quotes, but they were renewing properties. And what that meant was they were updating the quality if they were good at what they did. I had one client who did this consistently. He did it through 4 properties before he was able to buy his own home, and now he's doing his own home. I mean, he took generally 18 months anyway to do it.
Yeah.
But I think it's sad. Anyway,
One nuance to this just is that if you are buying a new construction condo that's not yet built, and you want to assign the contract, then you still, that 365 days still applies. So you can't an assignment of contract also is included in this definition of flipping. And then, so let's say you've agreed to buy a condo for $300,000. It doesn't close for 2 years. You don't flip it. Let's say you flipped it within the first year. You're going to pay the flipping tax. You don't flip it. 2 years later, you close on it. You purchase the property. You now are an owner. The 365 days resets, and you still are considered flipping it if you sell it within that year.
but I thought I have to check regarding assignments.
It's well, again, if there's no profit, then there's no tax, right?
Yeah, but doesn't the homeowner, the original homeowner, benefit on an assignment on the lift?
Unless it's in the writing in the contract, it wouldn't happen. Unless they try to flip without. This gets into some more nuances, but there's an anti-assignment rule in most contracts. So you're getting into a bit of a different example. But do check out, I just put in the post in the comments from Government of Canada, their anti-flipping rules, and it does go into some of these details. But that one, I think that's we can certainly talk about that at some point. I just don't know that. Okay.
A federal foreign buyer ban, so Non-Canadians Act, it's called, for 2 years. And they basically said no non-Canadians, non-Canadians were not allowed to purchase property in Canada.
Mhm.
And then all these exemptions came in. So
Yeah.
students, those who have filed income tax for the past 5 years in Canada, temporary residents, refugees, diplomats, non-Canadian spouses, spelling mistake, or common law partners, Indigenous people, and land.
Right.
And then there's also land exemptions for outside of big metropolises, essentially. And they have this definition here. What do you think is the unintended consequence of all of these? Or I don't think there's been a big difference in purchase.
I don't. First of all, I mean, the stats have shown that there's not a huge number of foreign buyers out there. There are foreign buyers, certainly, and that is a big. I think that's especially in some of the higher end markets. And it's always actually good, I think, to see investment in your country. And sometimes it can create some vibrancy. But one of the things that I found interesting was originally it was like, oh, all foreign buyers are banned, and then no, but okay, we'll let these buyers buy. Oh, but no, it's actually only banned in these certain specific areas. And what's been interesting for me, and this is a consistent thing I see with all of these rules, is here's the rule. Sometimes it's sort of brought in really quickly and you're not too sure. Yeah, exactly. It's very hard to advise clients because the rules are constantly changing. For example, they just recently expanded this census metropolitan area to include like Duncan and Squamish and some other areas that had been not part of it before. So I'll put again into the notes the census areas that they're talking about, that it's expanded recently. So you might have been working with some folks and said, okay, I think we're good to buy in Duncan because you're foreign buyers, but you can. And so the consequence, to get back to your question, is I think it's move people from these areas like Victoria, Vancouver, Toronto into some of the more, if you're a foreign buyer, you're moving into some of the less populated areas that don't fall under this restriction. So it just means that those areas will see where that activity is. But now they're also saying, no, not there either.
Yeah, they're trying to shunt people off to different areas. So, and there's also here, which we didn't mention, there's a foreign buyer tax if you buy in some of these areas, which is what Andrew's referring to as well. Like it's 20%.
Yeah, we got a federal and a provincial level of foreign restriction. One is a tax and one is an actual ban. So, yeah.
You're not welcome here is what it's saying.
Yeah.
And I think this is a political move. I don't know if it's a great one, but so the consequence has not been big. We looked at the, I think in April, we looked at the percentage of foreign ownership. It hadn't really changed. So it's only a minute percent anyway. And
it is really important, though, for anyone who's considering buying from who's not a Canadian citizen, landed immigrant, to get legal advice, to get accounting advice. There are rules on buying, there's rules on selling, all kinds of things that can affect your ownership. And it's much more in depth than what we've just talked about. So as much as we talk about these things, we always want to advise our clients to get those kinds of advice before making those decisions and putting your name down on a contract that could get you into some hot water.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Needs and wants, buddy.
Oh, God. Well, I still need a single level rancher really badly, townhouse, preferably under 875,000 in the preferably kind of Royal Oak-ish area, but also willing to look. We just wrote on View Royal and other areas. I've got someone looking for
what price?
Up to 875. Also looking similar, condo or townhouse up to $1 million, preferably again one level, 2 beds, 1 bath. That's more broad. That one's just sort of come back to the table, that buyer.
What area?
That one would be Central Saanich preferred, I would say, Royal Oak, Saanich West, Broadmead.
Jandy Grun is having one coming up today in Polo.
I will look it up. Thank you.
Okay. I'm looking for a single rancher style townhome. So one level, but it actually could be 2 levels. So primary bedroom on the main with upper lower bedrooms. 2 to 3 bedrooms would be good. And up to $1 million, please. That's kind of my priority right now.
Yeah. Yeah, we always have like 1 or 2 hot clients that are really hot. And then I've got 25, 30 people on kind of searches that are kind of watching, waiting for the right one. I mean, there's a specific building that I'm looking for. Like anything I'd say it's a condo with water views under 750, I would also be really interested in. But certainly there's a lot of people out there that when the right one comes up, they'll take action, but they're not actively calling me every day saying, can we see this? Can we see that?
So on that aside, if anybody's looking for 11.25 acres in Metchosin, arable land, folks, arable land, 2 houses, it's listed at 2.3 million. It's in the heart of Metchosin, like literally walking to my chosen cafe.
That sounds amazing. Actually, when you think of like 2 houses, so two families, and average house in Victoria is 1.2 or some thereabouts. So you're getting 11 acres and 2 properties for $1 million above the average. So yeah. That's a lot of additional land, and it's arable land too, which is rarer and rarer these days.
Yeah. Anyway, a third of it is forest, but you can also, if you want, mill that. And there's a property on Moreland right now which has a mill. Somebody wants to mill.
Build another house somewhere. Yeah. Okay. Well, that was fun. Thank you, Jane.
No problem. Do you want to deal with this slide?
I'll deal with it. So thanks everybody for watching. We do always appreciate your comments and your feedback and so forth. So please do continue to engage with us and send us your questions, and we'd love to hear your ideas or requests for future topics. If you like what we're doing, please do like it. And if you really like what we're doing, please subscribe for future shows. Love to see you.
Yeah, and don't forget to comment on our show. Let us know if you have any questions, and share this with your friends. This is important information.
Get the word out.
Get the word. Yo. Okay, we're on every Thursday morning at 9:30. Check here where we are right now on Facebook, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn. And if, again, just message Andrew if you have any questions about real estate. Andrew, what's your contact info?
Yeah, reach out. I'm at 250-360-6106. Info at andrewplank.com, andrewplank.com, and Instagram at plankandrew.
Right, and also if you want to reach out to me regarding real estate, my name's Jane Johnston. I'm with the Briar Hill Group. My number is 250-744-0775. My email is briarhillgroup@gmail.com. You can reach me on my website at briarhillgroup.com, and you can watch these videos and more at victoriarealestateshow.com. And if you want to follow me for lifestyle videos about what it's like to live in Victoria, come to realtyteacher_remax_ Victoria. Take care, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Happy Towel Day.
See you.
See you later. How long can we hold the smiles?
I don't know. Is it saying